Welcome back to Terrible at Fishing. Today we're going to talk about the fall turnover. So let's get into it. Alright, so fall turnover. Depending on where you are in the United States, you're either going to have it or you don't. But here in Oregon, it started already. What is a fall turnover? Well, good question you ask. So let's talk about this fall turnover. I'm going to change the background here a little bit. So we're going to start with what a summer lake looks like. A summer lake is something we all enjoy. We like swimming in warm water, which is up on the top. Yep. Damn. So you got the warm water on top, and then you got cold water on the bottom. And we call this the dead zone. So somewhere, and I'll tell you that, understand that in a second. The thermocline is the transition between top and bottom. So the thermocline is really a sweet spot in a lake. So typically your warm water, depending on lake, is the top 15 feet or so, then 15 to 25 feet is your thermocline or whatever. You understand, it's sort of like at the top, middle, and the bottom. The bottom is full of vegetation typically, and it's just eating up all the oxygen down there. It's very low oxygen. And so a lot of fish don't like to live down there. So a lot of fish like to live in the thermocline and the warm water. Well, what ends up happening when the water gets to around 50 degrees is that there's a turnover that happens. And so this turnover is where the top water switches out with the bottom water, and the bottom water comes up on top. So now as the warm water descends, the cold water ascends. So some lakes, like some of the ones that, like the one I work at, freeze over. Obviously, cold water on top. So the thermocline disappears during this turnover. I mean, it's just mixing and messy and stuff. In fact, the bottom of the lake, some of that vegetation and dead debris come up to the top. And what ends up happening is that you get this brownish, brackish lake that was at one time clear, and it becomes brackish, and it may even have an odor about it. Well, this is common. This is common while this turnover happens. Turnovers don't take a long time. When this happens, it typically happens fairly quickly. Now, shallower water, it happens faster than deeper water. So that's another thing about a lake. It doesn't always happen in the same portion of the lake at the same time. So it may finish in the shallower portion before it finishes in the deeper portion. So what we need to do then is understand where the fish go. So now we've got what was warm water up on top, down below, and the colder water down below is up on top. Certain fish like certain temperatures of water. So in the fall lake, that thermocline reappears as this mixing, exchanging settles down. And now, for instance, in Lake of the Woods, where I like to fish a lot and work at, the cold water fish come up to the top. So the trout are right now up on top. I mean, you could catch a trout right in that colder water and that thermocline area. So that area right there is sweet spot for the trout. Now the warmer water, it has descended. So the bass that we could catch 2 weeks ago on top water doesn't exist anymore. They've found new homes that they're comfortable in. They've moved. Now, one thing about this time of year on the turnover, that the bass are really gorging. They're getting big. It's a great time to catch them. In fact, the cold water fish that went to the top, now the water's colder on top, they're very hungry. In fact, this is probably one of the best times of year to fish. Trick is, where's the bass? Yeah, during the turnover, the bass, they're there. They're just hard to find. So a lot of people are on the lake right now, and they're saying, oh, I'm not getting any bites. There's nothing. Yeah, I got skunked, this and that. Well, that's true. But this is where having a fish finder is really important. So understanding your fish finder and looking down below to see where these undulations, the topography as it changes, these bumps and hills on the bottom. Again, the bass are feeding heavily right now. So you want to look for these ambush points, that the bass like. Usually these hills, mounds, or drop-offs. That's where you want to look. As for going real deep, you don't want to go too deep right now as the turnover happens. Because the water right now, like at Lake of the Woods, 56 degrees. Well, it's getting to that point. But right now, they're probably in that thermocline area, in that lower thermocline, lower stratus of the lake. They're not on the bottom just yet. So they're hitting, right now, all the fish are changing. So they're really into those ambush points. Once they finish feeding, those cold water fish are now going to gorge themselves, and they're becoming very lethargic, very inactive. And so as we bass fish in the winter and the fall, it becomes harder. This requires a lot of patience. This requires plastics and worms and stuff like that, wacky rigs, creature baits. You just drop it down in there, and Ned rig it. And you just try really hard to be very patient on these guys. You really have to put them right in front of them. So the turnover happens within about a week. So once the turnover has happened, then, you're good to go to find them in their winter homes. So that's really what we have to plan right now. Here in Oregon, that turnover is happened or happening, depending on which portion of the lake you're in. Find them on the radar. Look for undulations or mounds, ambush points, something about 2/3 of the way down in the lake, and look for those drop-offs. That's where the bass are going to be. The bass are not, repeat, they're not being caught in the shallows right now. They're just not. Ask anybody who's been at the lake. They're not finding bass where they were a week ago. It's just not there. So when you fish, make sure that you have the patience when it comes to the fall. But the nice thing is they're big. So when you get a hit, you're going to get a big hit on a mouth that big around. That is very exciting. So I want you guys to enjoy the season, have fun with it, and don't forget, when you're up at Lake of the Woods, say hi to me, because you know where you'll find me, out on the water. Take care, everybody.